People often say Seattle never sleeps. At night, it merely changes its clothes, from the silver of steel to the hue of rain, where the city lights fall glittering onto Lake Union like fragments of memory in free fall. At the center of it all, the Vail Arcology rose into the sky, magnificent and cold, a monument to power, to success built on numbers and million-dollar handshakes. That morning, Adrian Vail, 37 years old, stepped out of the elevator on the ground floor with the composure of a man the world called a genius. He didn't look at anyone, not out of arrogance, but because he was used to everyone bowing their heads before him. He had learned that in this world, only the strong had a voice. Then, as he walked across the grand basalt-floored lobby, through the scent of industrial polish and the shimmer of crystal lights, a small voice rose up. "Daddy, I finished my homework."
Can I tell you the new words I learned today?
It was a child's voice, clear as a droplet falling into a still lake. Adrian stopped. In a shadowed corner, a little girl sat beside a bucket of water, her dark brown hair tied high, her tiny hands holding a worn book. Beside her was Miguel Alvarez, the building's janitor, polishing a brass railing with his calloused hands. "Luna, hush." Miguel startled. "The boss is walking by." But the girl just lifted her head, her eyes bright enough to reflect the whole world. "I can speak 5 languages now," she said. That made Adrian's lips curl slightly, half a smirk, half intrigue. "5 languages? At your age? Then let's hear them." The girl tilted her head, her voice light as wind brushing through leaves. "Bonjour, Monsieur Vail." "Buenos dias, Señor." "Guten Morgen." "Здравствуйте." "Ili I tenis nux a wool." That last sound, in Chinook Wawa, the ancient language of the Pacific Northwest, was unlike anything Adrian had ever heard. It didn't echo in his ears. It resonated in his chest. The entire lobby fell silent. The lights reflected in the girl's eyes, shimmering, unafraid, while everyone else kept their heads low. Adrian stood there, phone still in hand, the glow of its screen casting a cold sheen over his glass-like face. He had once taken over corporations, commanded thousands of employees, shaken markets with a single signature, but never before had a poor child left him speechless. "Who taught you that?" he asked softly. Luna smiled and said, "No one. They just found me." Outside the glass, Seattle kept raining. But inside, for the first time in years, a powerful man felt small. He didn't yet know that this small voice, the one that made him stop, would become the beginning of a journey that would shatter his very definition of power. Mornings in Seattle always begin with rain, the kind that feels both like a lullaby and a warning. Raindrops, thin as silver threads, fall through the gaps between glass towers, scattering into shimmering reflections across the wet streets. People still walk briskly, collars up, earbuds in, eyes glued to their screens. In this city, even loneliness knows how to keep its posture. Inside the Vail Arcology, everything was programmed to shine. The black basalt floor gleamed so perfectly that it could mirror the pride of those who walked upon it. Chandeliers hung from an 8-meter ceiling, refracting crystal light against muted steel walls. Each morning here felt like a ritual, one that worshipped order, power, and efficiency. Adrian Vail appeared as if he were part of that ritual itself. Ash-gray overcoat, silver-blue silk tie, his footsteps steady and quick, each echo of his shoes ticking like the heartbeat of the building. People stepped aside. No one dared to look directly at him. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone made the world adjust around him. He was born to command, not to listen. And then, amid the mechanical symphony of that metallic world, another sound broke through. A child's voice, clear, honest, and entirely outside the system. "Daddy, I finished my homework."
Can I tell you the new words I learned today?
It was soft, but it pierced through the elevator chimes, the click of heels, the rain beating against glass. It was a discordant note that made the entire symphony falter. Adrian turned. In the far corner of the lobby, where the chandelier light didn't reach, a man knelt, wiping down the brass railing. His gray uniform was faded, one button patched up with white thread. Beside him sat a little girl, her legs swinging, hair tied neatly with a worn pink ribbon. The man looked up, saw the owner of the building, and froze. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vail. She just wanted to talk for a moment," he stammered. Adrian tilted his head slightly. The girl looked at him, her gaze unlike any he'd ever encountered. No fear, no awe, no servility, only clarity, and something strangely knowing. "I can speak 5 languages now," she said brightly. Adrian's lips curved, the cold smile breaking the air between them. "5 languages? At your age? Then show me." The girl tilted her head, the dim light reflecting in her honey-brown eyes. "Bonjour, Monsieur Vale. Buenos dias, Señor. Guten Morgen. Здравствуйте. Ili itenes noaxus awul." The last sound froze the air. Not because it was strange, but because it had a soul. It was deep, ancient, a voice that seemed to rise from the soil and water, like a whisper of the old forests. The language of the Chinook people, those who lived here long before concrete towers reached the clouds. Adrian stood still. He had studied German in Munich, French at the Sorbonne, Japanese through trade consultants, but never before had a sound made him feel named. "Who taught you that?" he asked, voice rough. "No one," the girl said softly. "They just found me." Her father lowered his head, ashamed and frightened. But Adrian no longer heard him. In that moment, standing inside his empire of glass and authority, something inside him cracked. He, the man who had made corporations bow, had no words before a janitor's child. That morning, the 9 a.m. meeting was postponed. Adrian sat in his office on the 78th floor, staring out at the city. The rain kept falling, tracing long streaks down the glass. He tried to focus on numbers, charts, and forecasts, but his mind kept drifting back to the lobby, to the girl sitting beside the bucket. In his head, that strange Chinook word echoed again and again, like a code he had spent his life unable to decipher. He never believed in miracles. Since childhood, he'd learned to see the world as an equation: formulas, efficiency, profit, risk. To him, language was merely a tool of negotiation, the elegant disguise of control. But that voice that didn't belong to business or power, had made him still. Made him listen for the first time in years. By 11, Jessica, his assistant, entered with a stack of files. "Mr. Vale, the Tokyo report just came in. I need your signature." Adrian nodded, signing without reading. Jessica noticed something off in his eyes. Not sharp as usual, but distant, clouded. "Are you all right, sir? There's something I don't understand." "About work?" "No, about people." She didn't know what to say. As she left, she heard him murmur to himself, 5 languages. A child, how is that possible? By late afternoon, the rain hadn't stopped. The city turned bluish-gray, light sliding off every window of the arcology. High above, Adrian still hadn't left. He opened his laptop and typed, "Multilingual child prodigy, language acquisition, Chinook Wawa." Hundreds of articles appeared, from MIT research papers to interviews about neurodiversity in children. He read, took notes, and stopped at one line. "Some children acquire languages not by learning them, but by remembering." Remembering? He repeated, frowning. Could Luna be remembering something others had forgotten? He thought of her eyes, not boastful, but as if she were delivering a message she didn't fully understand herself. For the first time in years, Adrian felt small. Not before rivals, not before markets, but before something vast, profoundly human, something beyond any strategy he'd ever made. When the city lights came on, he finally left the building. The black Bentley slid through rain-soaked streets. But tonight, instead of heading to the airport or his penthouse, he told the driver to stop at an old cafe in Belltown, one he used to visit as a student. The cafe was nearly empty. He sat by the window, ordered an espresso. Outside, the rain mingled with soft jazz, autumn leaves, trembling like memory. He opened his notebook and wrote one line. "I have forgotten the sound of truth." The words startled him. He wasn't the kind of man who kept journals, nor one who believed in feelings. But tonight, feeling was the only thing that still felt real. That night, in his penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, he couldn't sleep. The wind struck the glass, rumbling like the breath of the sea. On his desk, the laptop still glowed, paused on a documentary about multilingual children. A researcher said, "Language is how humans touch each other, without using their hands." He muted the sound, but the words stayed with him. He saw the girl again in his mind. Tiny hands, fearless eyes, a voice that flowed through languages like water through stone. A child born into poverty, surrounded by the scent of detergent, yet speaking words that could stop his entire world. Perhaps true power didn't lie in the contracts he signed every day. Perhaps it lay in the ability to make others listen, not with their ears, but with their hearts. For the first time in his life, Adrian Vale didn't want to control. He wanted to understand. The next morning, as pale daylight filtered through the clouds, Adrian sat slouched in his chair, shirt wrinkled, tie undone. On the table, his laptop was still open, frozen on a page about the indigenous languages of the Pacific Northwest. The background photo showed Chinook children learning the tongue of their ancestors, a language once deemed useless in the modern world. Below it was a quote, "Every time a language dies, the world loses a way of understanding the universe." Wade Davis, he read it 3 times. Then he whispered, as if making a vow he didn't yet understand, "No one in my building will ever be invisible again." The words hung in the quiet air, sounding like an order, not to others, but to himself. By 7 a.m., Adrian Vale, dressed in a fresh suit and holding a cup of black coffee, stepped into the elevator heading down. Jessica looked up in surprise. "Mr. Vale, is something wrong?" "The investment board hasn't convened yet. I know. I just want to see my building." She frowned, puzzled, but he offered no explanation. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor. The lobby gleamed as always. Custodial staff moved quietly about their work. For the first time, Adrian really saw them. Faces, rhythms, stories. He realized that for years he'd seen only functions, not people. Near the west corridor stood a small metal bucket. "No, Luna." He looked around, then asked the floor supervisor softly, "Where's Alvarez?" "He's been moved to the maintenance level, sir." "His daughter's probably at school." Adrian nodded and turned to leave, but stopped before the old bucket. On its side, written in marker, were the words, "Vale Tower, don't forget to listen." Probably just Luna's doodle. Yet in a building where everything else was sterile and perfect, that small message carried an inexplicable weight. He brushed his hand over the metal. It was cold, yet there was warmth beneath. When he returned to his office, Jessica announced, "Sir, your 9 a.m. meeting with the Singapore investors. Cancel it." "Sir?" "I have something more important." She froze. In 8 years of working with him, she had never heard him say that. "What could be more important, sir?" "Listening." The office door closed. Outside, the rain began to ease, the gray sky slowly parting to reveal a faint light. No one inside Vale Arcology knew that on that morning. When a CEO chose to walk down to the basement instead of up to the boardroom, an empire had begun to change. Not through a meeting, but through a small voice that once echoed in a marble hall. Top of form night draped the city like a damp blanket soaked with smoke and rain. Seattle after midnight wasn't silent, it only changed tempo. Traffic thinning, streetlights glimmering on the water, and the horns out on the bay breathing in like the sighs of drifting souls. On the top floor of the Vale Arcology, Adrian Vale's apartment was still lit. Warm light spilling across glass and reflecting his face. Pale, tired, unable to sleep, he sat at the desk, a glass of whiskey untouched, an old book open before him, Language and the Mind, by Professor Sarah Chen. The pages were yellowed, corners folded, with a few pencil lines someone had once written, "Language is not learned, it is remembered." He read that line again and again, as if inside it he'd found something both beautiful and dangerous, a small door leading toward what his mind had tried to forget. Luna Alvarez. That name had echoed in his head since morning. A 7-year-old child fluent in 5 languages, speaking with grammar precise to the rhythm of breath. But what kept him awake wasn't the knowledge, it was the look in her eyes when she spoke, clear, unruffled, unboastful. That voice felt as if it had existed before the language it used. He wondered, could it be that the child hadn't learned to speak like other children, but was remembering something older, farther, a language already lying in her blood? Rain hammered the glass. Light broke into slanting lines across the desk. He closed his eyes, and in the dim shadow of his mind, Luna's voice rose, small, gentle, like wind moving through layers of sleeping words. "No one taught me." They just came to me. They. She called the languages they, as if they were alive, as if they had a will of their own. Adrian opened his laptop and typed night chorus, a vague phrase he had just read in an old excerpt from Sarah's book. Few results appeared. A project deleted from public records in 2012. Principal investigator, Dr. Sarah Chen. Research category, polyglot cognition in early age subjects. Beneath the description, a red warning. Classified, access restricted. Something cold ran down his spine. He didn't know whether he was searching for answers or unearthing a secret that had been buried alive. His eyes stopped at the year 2018, the year Sarah Chen died in a car accident with her young daughter. He drew a deep breath, the sensation familiar, like someone had just tapped a locked memory. The daughter, what was her name? Luna. The name slashed across his mind like lightning. He lurched up, reopened the building's personnel files. Under technical custodial staff, a line read, Miguel Alvarez, 42. Dependent, Luna Alvarez, born 2018. No information on the mother. He froze, heart pounding. Sarah Chen, the linguist who had led Project Night Chorus. Miguel Alvarez, her husband. Luna, the child in the project notes. And he, the man who had signed the funding approval. A thick fog rolled over his thoughts. He didn't remember meeting Sarah, but deep within, a woman's voice seemed to echo back, warm and stern. If we stop listening, the world will go silent. He clenched the whiskey glass, the liquor spilling, running over his fingers like blood. In that instant, everything he had believed in, reason, ethics, control, cracked. Near 4 a.m, he rose, pulled on a raincoat. The urge inside him wouldn't let him wait another minute. The Arcology's maintenance level had never seen its owner. The air smelled of oil, metal, sweat. Steam hissed from a broken pipe, clouding the corridor. Miguel Alvarez was replacing a valve when Adrian appeared. The man started, straightening, wiping his brow. Mr. Vale? I didn't expect you down here. I need to talk. About... What, sir? Your daughter. Miguel went still. The weak light from a flickering bulb climbed his weathered face, eyes tired yet strangely bright. Did Luna do something wrong? No, but I need to know who her mother is. A beat of silence. Water dripped steadily, like a heart ticking inside the room. At last Miguel set the wrench down, his voice low. Sarah Chen, she was a researcher. My wife, the air froze. Adrian couldn't speak. Miguel looked at him, his gaze both unyielding and pained. She died in a crash 4 years ago. They called it an accident, but I don't believe it. Sarah was too smart. She found something they didn't want her to say. Who are they? Adrian asked, though in his heart he already knew. The Vale Foundation. The organization that funded her project. After she died, they cut contact, erased the data. All I had left was Luna, and Sarah's notes. Miguel stared into nothing, his voice catching. Sarah said Luna could hear what others couldn't. That when the child spoke, it felt like language was coming back to life. Adrian felt his chest twist. He could no longer tell fear from awe. Mr. Alvarez, he said quietly, if Sarah were alive, what would she want? Miguel met his eyes. She'd want the world to listen again. The next morning, the Seattle sky seemed blurred beneath a sheet of rain. Adrian went to the Central Library, a steel and glass building few still visited. He'd once funded the place and now returned like a stranger. He asked the elderly librarian about Sarah Chen. The man said nothing, then led him to a third-floor corner where an unclaimed personal archive still sat. Inside, a few papers, a notebook, a silver USB. He plugged it into his laptop. A single audio file. Name, nightchorus-prototype.wev. He put on headphones. In his ears, children's voices rose, dozens layered together, speaking different languages. English, Japanese, Russian, Spanish, even the indigenous Chinook tongue. The sounds interwove, forming a strange chorus. And within them, a girl's voice rang, clear, high, eerily precise. If they forget our voices, the world will stop speaking. The line went straight through him. He pulled the headphones off, heart thudding. The file was dated 2018, when Luna had been only an infant. Beneath the metadata stood 2 letters. Subject LC, he murmured. Voice pattern inherited. Inherited voice? A thought flashed, dizzying him. Sarah had experimented with transmitting sound through genes, a project the Vale Foundation had banned for being unethical. Could it be that Luna carried her mother's voice, not metaphorically but literally? The library windows shivered in the wind. He stood and looked out, rain lashing the glass like characters trying to speak but unable. A voice inside him whispered, "When language is no longer just for speaking, it becomes a bridge between souls." He didn't know whether he heard it or remembered it, but he understood one thing. If the Veil Foundation had done wrong, he was the man who had signed the guilt. By the time he returned to the apartment, the sky was black. The city glowed as if trying to hide its darkness with electricity. He sat down, replayed the recording again and again. Each time he heard beneath the layers a breath, a heartbeat, the pulse of people. He closed his eyes. Luna's voice, Sarah's voice, his own, blending. And for the first time in years, Adrian Vale no longer heard power, contracts, shares. He heard only, "Leave." He opened his eyes, lifted his phone to call Miguel, but the screen lit before he could dial. An anonymous message appeared. "You shouldn't have listened to that. They know. Don't go near Alvarez. The girl isn't there anymore." His hands trembled. No sender. Only an icon of a vibrating sound ring. Outside, the rain came down harder. Thunder rolled from the north, where Everett's forests lie hidden in fog. Adrian stared out the window, eyes cold and bright as metal. The rain mirrored in his gaze like 1,000 drifting characters, each drop a word left unsaid. And in that moment, he knew. From here on, nothing would be an experiment. This was atonement. He turned off the lights and stepped out the door. The penthouse went black. Left on the desk was the old book, open in the middle. The pencil line Sarah had written nearly faded. Language doesn't need listeners. But people do. The message still glimmered on the phone screen like a thin cut. "Don't go near Alvarez. The girl isn't there anymore." Adrian stared at the line, the light casting a metallic chill across his face. No number, no sender's name, only a tiny pulsing sound wave icon, as if someone were still listening. He stood up. In that instant, the penthouse felt too still, too clean, too unfeeling, as if it had been built not to contain a real human being. He put on his coat, grabbed his keys, left behind the world of glass and steel, and stepped into the street. At 3 in the morning, the city seemed to sink into the pulse of the storm. Rain smeared the streetlights into ink-like streaks. His car slid past rows of old brick buildings toward South Lake Union, where Miguel lived. The road to the workers' apartments was flooded with rain, yellow lights blurred. When he arrived, the door to Unit 206 was open. Inside, the small apartment looked ransacked. Toppled chairs, fallen books, Luna's little pink backpack tossed on the floor. No voices, no signs of a struggle, only one thing. A photo of Sarah Chen smiling, and scrawled on the back, "If you remember, find Katerina." Katerina. The name grazed his memory like a scratch. He'd seen it somewhere, once in old Veil Foundation files. Among hundreds of blacked-out lines, Dr. Katerina V., co-director of Night Chorus. He sat down, the photo in his hand, watching dim light seep through the doorway. Outside, the rain didn't stop. He knew that if Sarah had left this message, there was only one person who truly knew what had happened to her, and to Luna. The next afternoon, Adrian drove north along the road skirting Lake Washington. Waterlogged trees ran in long rows, their reflections mixing with the lake like another world. Coordinates traced from old data led to a small house on a slope outside Edmonds, where sea and forest meet. A low wooden house, white paint peeling on the door, a thin plume of kitchen smoke curling from an old chimney. He knocked. After a moment, slow footsteps, and a woman appeared. She was in her 60s, silver hair neatly tied back, eyes clear and weary, like someone who had lived long enough to be unsurprised by anything returning. "You're later than I expected," she said, her voice distinctly Eastern European. "Are you Katerina?" "I used to be." Adrian didn't know where to begin. The head of Vale now stood on the threshold of a humble house, like an old pupil seeking a lesson from someone who had long left his world. "I came because of Sarah," she smiled sadly. "Everyone comes because of her, but no one listened to her." Katerina opened the door and motioned him in. The small room was crowded with books, stacks of documents piled to the ceiling. On the table sat an old tape machine, the reel-to-reel kind, beside dozens of labeled spools, Subject LC, Prototype Test 7, Voice Wave 2018. She poured tea, an herbal scent lifting into the damp air. You still don't remember, do you? Adrian looked up. What am I supposed to remember? That you were the one who helped Sarah design the night chorus project. The words dropped like a stone into a still lake. Every sound in the room seemed to stop. No, that's impossible. You think the Vale Foundation only funded it? No, you were the one who asked the first question. If language has a soul, can humans copy it? And Sarah answered you with her whole life. Adrian pushed back his chair, breathing hard. Images shattered in his mind. White laboratories, cold light, a woman's laughter among rows of frequency meters. He saw himself there, younger, eyes bright with curiosity, and Sarah writing on a board. Voice memory. Living code. They erased your memory after she died, Katerina said evenly. It was the only way to keep you in the CEO's seat. You had authority, power, influence. They needed you, but not your knowledge. And Luna? The first living embodiment of the project. Living embodiment? A child born of two people with different inherited linguistic structures, Sarah and Miguel, with a rare capacity for vocal frequency resonance. Luna was the result of the final experiment, where language was no longer learned, but transmitted like a gene. Adrian met her gaze. You speak as if language were a living creature. And why not? She replied, eyes brightening. I once told Sarah that language is the only form of energy that both creates the world and destroys it. When the child speaks for the first time, the world must listen. She can connect dead languages and make them live again. That's why they want to capture Luna. Yes, because when she speaks, the Vale Foundation's machines respond. The frequency of her voice makes AI learn emotion, the very thing humans lost while trying to teach machines to think. And Sarah died for that. Katerina was silent. She held her cup, eyes lowered. Sarah didn't die in an accident. She was being watched. I tried to warn her. That day she said she would take Luna and run. But the Vale Foundation found out. The car's brakes were tampered with. By the time I arrived, there was only twisted metal and a baby's crying. Her voice trembled softly, as if each word were a knife touching memory. I gave Luna to Miguel, and I disappeared. Adrian sat still, his hands shaking. In his head, everything collapsed. The Vale Foundation. They're still looking for the child? Yes, and now that you've come back, they know you remember. They'll be here soon. Outside, the wind rose. The window panes shivered. Katerina stood, opened a drawer, and took out a small device, an old hard drive, wrapped in cloth. Sarah left me this for when everything went out of control. It's the core of Night Chorus, the very first voice prototype. Not Luna's. Yours? Mine? Adrian stared. You tested on your own voice. You and Sarah created the first audio replica that could respond to a listener's emotion. You called it a voice seed. Sarah used it to activate Luna while she was still in the womb. A cold current swept through him. He took the drive. His palm was slick with sweat. If that's true, then everything she did was because of me. No, because of the truth. And you are inside that truth. She stepped closer, laid a hand on his shoulder. Don't fear memory, Adrian. It doesn't kill us. It only demands to be heard again. In that moment, he heard a strange sound, low, steady, like the heartbeat of the house itself. From the drive in his hand, a faint tone rose, Sarah's voice braided with the wind. Adrian, if you can hear me, go toward the sea. Lightning flashed outside, flooding the room with white. Adrian looked up, eyes wide as if waking from a decades-long sleep. Katerina smiled, eyes glistening. Voices don't die. They only wait for someone brave enough to listen again. He nodded, tightening his grip on the drive. Outside, the storm was rolling in from the bay. But in the lightning's flare, Adrian Vale stepped out of his own shadow for the first time. No longer a CEO, no longer a patron, only a human being searching for a voice the world had stolen. He left the house, rain lashing his face like 1,000 unanswered questions. The engine turned over, tires cutting through water, the car lunging toward the sea. On the car radio, the signal broke into static, and amidst the noise, a child's voice rose, faint and far. Uncle Adrian. I'm here. Adrian clenched the wheel. The console's blue glow lit his eyes, bright as a flame flaring in endless rain. The city's storm had only begun, and for the first time, Adrian Vale knew. Silence is a language too, but only those who have lost their voice can hear it. Night fell like a thin steel curtain draped over the city. Seattle lay still in the mist of rain, traffic lights glittering on water-smeared roads like fragments of memory spilling out. Adrian Vale sat in his car, hands still gripping the wheel. The GPS screen glowed dimly, showing a single string of coordinates, what Sarah's hard drive had emitted when he plugged it in. No map, only numbers, 47.9610 again, 122.1996 W. He didn't know what waited there. He only knew Sarah's voice, fine, gentle, still sounded in his head. If you can hear me, go toward the sea. The sea. He had long since forgotten what the sea smelled like. Work, power, sealed boardrooms. They had turned him into someone who lived among glass and machines, no longer touching the real natural world. Now the sea itself was leading him back, like an old song switched on after years of neglect. The rain thickened. He drove through the forest, wind throwing water against the glass. Headlights sliced the night, flashing off wet trunks like silver. Every bend was slick, but he didn't stop. Rain, light, and engine merged into the racing heartbeat of a man sprinting against his own past. Near midnight, he reached a dirt road running to Possession Sound. Far ahead, the darkness opened like the mouth of a great beast, and in it, a low concrete building sat silently. A faint light within. Vale Research, Unit 47. He cut the engine. Rain still pounded the hood like an urgent drum. Drawing a long breath, he opened the door and stepped into the night. Mud swallowed water, every footfall a wet sucking sound. The air reeked of rust, the smell of something dead that hadn't yet dissolved. A steel door stood ajar, the wind turning its hinge into a long, groaning sigh of the past. Inside was pitch black. He flicked on a flashlight. Its beam swept across broken circuit boards, snarled wires, cloudy jars still rimmed with dust. On the wall hung a faded poster in tarnished silver letters. Human Language Interface, the future of communication. Every word now felt like a taunt. In the corner he found a console still alive. On its screen, among blinking characters, a line appeared. Voice data, subject LC. He stepped closer, breath quickening. The drive in his pocket began to buzz softly, as if answering something. He plugged it into the port. The screen flared white. Then a voice sounded, not from the speakers but from the air itself, as if the walls were speaking. Adrian, if you're here, it means they didn't erase everything. He froze. Sarah. There was no mistaking that voice. That timbre had once kept time with his youth, and now it echoed through a dead room. You once said, language is what people create. I laughed. Because I knew language creates people. It decides who gets to speak, who must be silent. You understand now, don't you, Adrian? He gripped the console, light mirrored in his eyes. Sarah, they killed you, didn't they? No one can kill a voice if it has already found a listener. The voice cut off, and the screen cued a video. Sarah sat there in this very lab, her face tired but calm. Beside her, a clear cradle. Inside, a newborn slept. Tiny skin rising and falling with breath. This is Luna, Sarah said in the video, her voice trembling. She's the result of the final trial. The voice coded in her DNA reacts to your voice, Adrian. She heard you before she was born. He staggered a step back, heart racing. Don't let them turn her voice into property. Language shouldn't be programmed. It should be loved. The screen went dark. In that instant, another sound came from the back corridor, faint, fragile, like a child singing. He turned, heart-dropping. Liaitina's Nexuizawal, that song? Chinukwawa, the near-vanished tongue of the old world. He followed the sound, his flashlight trembling in his hand. Down a long flooded passage, he found a door ajar. Beyond it lay an open yard, rain falling like a silver curtain. In the center, a little girl sat with her knees drawn up, dark brown hair plastered wet, eyes wide toward the sky. Luna. He stood there, afraid to speak, afraid to break the fragile stillness. She turned, met his gaze. No surprise, no fear, and only a calm that said she knew he would come. Uncle Adrian, the girl said, voice as light as rain. Mama said when the wind carries the song, you'll find it. He stepped closer, knelt before her, his hand shaking as it touched her small shoulder. How long have you been here? Aunt Katerina brought me. She said I should wait. Mama said when the time is right, you'll hear me. He nodded. rain running over his face and breath. "We have to leave now, Luna. Someone's coming." "I know," she said, glancing past him. "They came when I started to sing." An engine growled. Headlights slashed across them, blinding. Shadows fell long and black on the ground. Adrian seized Luna's hand and ran. The rear door banged open. They plunged into the rain, crossing the sodden lot. Footsteps behind, shouted orders, the click of safeties. He shoved Luna into the back seat, fired the engine. The tires fountained water. "Uncle, what do they want?" Luna asked, curiously calm in the storm. "What only you have." "My voice?" "Yes. Your voice gives their machines a soul. But if they control it, people will forget how to speak truth." She was quiet, then murmured, "Mama said whoever tries to steal another's voice will lose their own." He glanced in the mirror, chest tightening. Behind, a black SUV clung to them, headlights like cold, unblinking eyes. He wrenched the wheel onto a coastal dirt track. Waves crashed under the cliffs. Wind howled. A bolt of lightning tore the sky, washing the road in white. And in that flash, he saw an abandoned warehouse by the bay. He swung the car in, skidding to a stop under thunder. A metal door gave way. He pulled Luna inside. The storage hall was damp, dark, lit only by the storm's strobe. He steadied his breath, scanning. "We're safe for now. But promise me one thing." "What is it?" "No matter who tries to silence you, you must keep speaking." "Don't be afraid." She looked at him, eyes shimmering. "I only speak when someone is willing to listen." "Then I'm listening." She smiled, closed her eyes, and began to sing. Her voice was small, gentle, yet every note seemed to touch something deep in the air. Sound bounced from wall to metal to the rain outside, weaving a strange resonance, as if the building itself were singing with her. A language no one understood, but one that made everyone silent. Adrian sat still, tears mixing with the rain. He no longer knew where the storm ended and the song began, only that something was melting inside his chest. Memory, guilt, fear, all blending into one pulse. In the white flare of lightning, he saw Sarah's face on the damp wall, her smile as tender as wind. "You heard it, Adrian." Outside, the storm raged on, but within the warehouse a peculiar calm spread. Luna's voice thinned. She leaned against his shoulder and fell asleep. Adrian sat there, holding her. In the distance came police sirens braided with surf. He knew they would arrive. But he wasn't afraid anymore because he had heard what the world had forgotten, the true voice. Dawn rose slowly, an ashen gray along the shore. Adrian carried Luna from the warehouse across the slick road to the rain-drenched car. He settled her in the seat and drew a blanket over her. The weak sun broke through clouds and struck the rear view. He looked back. In the sleeping child's eyes, the sky shimmered faintly. He started the engine and rolled toward the city. Every bend, every gust, carried the aftertones of the night's song, something he didn't understand, but knew had woken a world that slept. Seattle glowed ahead, towers catching the first light. The Vale Arcology still stood, proud, cold. But this time, Adrian didn't see it with the eyes of an owner. He saw it as someone who knew power couldn't buy what he had just recovered, the meaning of a voice. He stopped on the Aurora Bridge, looked out over the water's flicker. In his chest, Sarah's voice and Luna's braided into a closing chord. Language does not create people. Only when people are brave enough to speak truth do they create language. He smiled. For the first time in years, that smile wasn't for a contract, but for something simple. He had learned to listen again. And somewhere on the horizon, between wind and cloud, a child's song rose once more, carrying the words of the old generation into the new. 3 days after the storm, Seattle brightened beneath a thick veil of mist. The rain had passed, but the air still carried the scent of metal and electricity, as if the city were panting after a bad dream. Adrian Vale stood before the large window in his apartment, looking down at the street. Thousands of people in a rush, cars in single file, billboards flashing his name everywhere. Vale Innovations, language for the future. He saw that slogan and smiled faintly, a smile both bitter and light, as if it belonged to someone else. Luna was still asleep on the sofa, curled under a large blanket. Her dark brown hair fell across her forehead, her lips moving slightly in a dream. She was still dreaming, perhaps of the sea or of her mother's song. He made coffee. The bitter aroma drifted through the quiet room. Every small sound, The drip from the filter, the wind seeping through the doorframe, grew strangely distinct. He realized that once a person has learned to listen, the whole world finds its own rhythm. On the table, the laptop was still open. Before him was a top-secret report. Night chorus, level 0 recovered data. The last line was handwritten. In Sarah's script, if language can feel fear, then it can also learn love. He read it over and over. And for the first time, he understood why Sarah had said, language has a soul. Not because letters live, but because people turn numb when they no longer dare to use them to speak truth. In that late morning, the phone rang. A deep, decisive male voice, one he knew too well. Marshall Green, chairman of the Vail Foundation. Adrian, you've made the board nervous. Rumor has it you accessed the banned project's data. They want to see you today. I'll come, Adrian replied evenly. But this time, they'll be the ones listening to me. The Vail Foundation headquarters stood just across Lake Union, the tallest glass tower in the city, the crowning work Adrian had once considered his life's glory. But today, as he stepped into the lobby, the cold white light revealed hidden cracks in everything. All eyes turned toward him, nods, greetings, but no one truly looked. He recognized it. Faces that can speak, yet no one truly says anything. The elevator took him to the 80th floor, the central conference room. 12 people sat around the table, the most powerful faces in tech and finance. On the big screen, Crisis Management, Vail's Unauthorized Access. Green looked up. You've disappointed us, Adrian. You promised the Night Chorus project would be buried. Are you planning to dig it up? I'm not digging it up, Adrian said slowly, eyes fixed on him. I'm giving its voice back. The room fell silent. A woman across the table cleared her throat. You know full well that if this information is made public, the market will collapse. Vail will lose everything. We've already lost, Adrian answered, voice steady now. We just refuse to see it. He took out the USB, the hard drive Sarah had left, and set it on the table. This is the core of Night Chorus. Not just data, but a warning. You tried to teach machines to learn language, but forgot that language is born of pain and hope. When a machine speaks without knowing why it must speak, that's no longer language. That's imitation. What are you going to do? Green asked, his gaze razor cold. Broadcast it. Let everyone hear. You're insane. We'll stop you. That project is banned by international law. What law forbids people from hearing the truth? No one answered. In that moment, he saw Sarah again, sitting in the lab, eyes shining like a spark in the dark. You'll listen again, won't you? Her voice rose from memory. He nodded slightly. Then he took out his phone and opened the encrypted link Katerina had sent the night before, a live broadcast file. What are you doing, Adrian? Green growled. Opening a door. He plugged the USB into the central console. The room's lights flickered. The main screen flared on, the background music cut, replaced by a small sound. Static at first, then a voice. Luna's voice. Hello. The sound was fragile, but it resonated across Vail's communication systems. From office floors to employees' phones, from outdoor billboards to the shareholders' live stream in session. A child speaking in many languages at once. English, Spanish, Japanese, Russian, then Chinook Wawa. Each sentence a different timbre, yet blending into a continuous melody that belonged to no single language. And to all of them, the whole city went quiet. People in the conference room glanced at one another. Some panicked, others dazed. Green slammed the table. Turn it off! Now, but no one moved. Each person seemed pinned in place, listening to something not in their ears, but in their chests. An elderly man began to cry without knowing why. A female security guard at the door touched her chest lightly. Frightened but unable to turn away, on the screen, a line appeared. Voice recognized, human pattern detected. The voice continued. Now threaded with a backdrop. Rain, wind, the breathing of millions. The child spoke, but not to be understood. She spoke only to make people remember a feeling they had forgotten. Adrian closed his eyes. Tears slid down. He heard Sarah, not with his ears, but with memory. Do you hear it, Adrian? The human voice when it is no longer afraid. When he opened his eyes, every gaze was fixed on him. Green's hands trembled. His voice was hoarse. What? What did you do to the system? I did nothing. I just let the world hear itself again. Outside the glass, rain began to fall. But this time it wasn't cold. Noonlight fractured, reflecting across thousands of windows in the city. On the streets, pedestrians stopped. They looked up and listened. No one understood the words, but all grew still. The sound seemed to thread through the city's nerves, as if every wall, power, status, fear, cracked at once, and on the highest floor, in the room that once steered the world's power, Adrian Vale said only one sentence, soft as breath. Silence is a voice. 2. But only those who have lost theirs understand it. He pulled the USB. The screen went dark. Luna's voice was gone. Only real rain remained. In the real world, in that instant, the world seemed reset. That afternoon, Adrian left the Vale Foundation. No one stopped him. The glass doors closed behind him, reflecting a man who no longer carried the title of CEO, only his true voice. He stepped into the street, rain in his hair, cold and wet. In the crowd, he heard children laughing, car horns, wind in steel pipes. Everything had rhythm, had meaning. He stopped by the light rail stop and saw Luna sitting on the bench, legs swinging, Katerina beside her. The girl smiled and waved. "You're late." "I didn't want to miss the final song." She tilted her head, beaming. "There isn't a final song, Uncle, only the next one." He nodded, gently ruffling her hair. "So you'll teach the world to sing again?" "No, I'll just help them remember they once knew how." The simple answer, light as wind, made him weep. Katerina stood, drawing her coat close. "I spent my whole life studying language," she said. "But it turns out what we need to relearn isn't how to speak, it's how to listen." The train arrived, metal screeching. Luna stepped on, then looked back. "Uncle Adrian, Mama said that when the world begins to listen again, you'll be forgiven." "And you?" "I never blamed you." The door slid shut. The train rolled into the rain, its lights skimming her face, that clear gaze drifting away into the city. Adrian stood there, watching until the last glow disappeared. Overhead, the clouds parted. A faint brightness opened over Lake Union. He lifted his head and closed his eyes. In his mind, Luna's song rose again, no longer a child's voice, but a chord of countless human voices. A faceless chorus spreading through the city. They say that night, Seattle was silent for 10 minutes. No one spoke, no one typed, no advertisement made a sound. Only the sound of rain, of hearts, and of old voices returning. And Adrian Vale, the man who once silenced the world with power, finally learned to speak again with his heart. And the world, after a very long time, began to listen. News spreads faster than any fire in the digital age. Within just 48 hours of the Vale Tower event, the world flooded with conflicting headlines. CEO exposes his own conglomerate mid-board meeting. The mysterious child and the voice that silenced a city. Night chorus, secret government program exposed. And finally, Adrian Vale, genius or traitor to humanity. The media made him both symbol and target at once. Videos of Luna's voice spread like a modern hymn. Millions shared them, millions more denied them. People began to argue conspiracy or miracle. In a small apartment in the city's north, Adrian watched it all on a dim screen, the TV's light reflected on a face visibly leaner. He was no longer the man striding through cold boardrooms, no longer the power icon in an expensive suit. He was just a quiet man sitting in the dark, listening to the world debate the meaning of himself. Katerina came in, a cup of hot tea in hand. She set it down softly before him and sat, her gaze both gentle and heavy. "You haven't eaten in 2 days." "News won't change the truth, Adrian." He smiled faintly. "Truth is sometimes no different from a plague, Katerina. When it spreads, no one knows what they're protecting, or what they're afraid of." She studied him for a long moment, then asked softly, "Do you regret it?" "No, but I'm afraid. Not of losing money or reputation. I'm afraid for the child. I'm afraid they'll do to Luna what they did to Sarah." Katerina was silent. She looked out the window where the city lights receded in the rain. "I'm afraid too. But you know, light can't be taken back once it's turned on." The next morning, a convoy of black cars stopped in front of the building. A firm knock sounded at the door. A man in a gray suit with a National Security Agency badge stepped in. His face was stern, his voice cold and slow. "Mr. Vale, I'm Special Agent Sam Whitaker. We need your cooperation in investigating the unauthorized broadcast at Vale Tower." "I didn't broadcast anything," Adrian said, eyes not leaving the laptop screen. I only reopened a channel the world forgot to switch off. Whitaker placed a file on the table. This is a temporary order. You are suspended from all executive authority related to the Vale Foundation. All technological assets, especially Night Chorus project data, must be surrendered. And if I don't, then you will be regarded as a national security threat. Adrian gave a quiet, weary laugh, no longer defiant, only tired. When I kept quiet, you called me a brilliant mind. Now that I tell the truth, I'm a threat. The world is built on order, Mr. Vale. No, the world is built on language. And language never stays still. Whitaker said nothing. He stared at Adrian for a few more seconds, then gathered the file. We'll be back. And when we return, we won't be asking. The door closed. Footsteps receded. Katerina sighed. They won't stop. Adrian nodded. I know. Which is why I have to move first. That night, he and Katerina left the city in an old car, heading south along the highway. Wind blew hard, streetlights stretching into long bands like ribbons of memory. Luna sat in the back seat, clutching her small backpack. Inside it, the original Night Chorus drive. Where are we going, Uncle Adrian? To a place where your voice won't be recorded. Will my mom be there? He looked at her in the mirror, his gaze softening. Maybe. You'll hear her there. The car drove on through the night, rain drumming the glass like a driving beat. They reached Oregon at sunrise. A weathered wooden house stood in a pine forest. Once a wartime research station, now abandoned. Katerina checked the power. Adrian set up a small transmitter, linking data from Sarah's drive. He planned to rebroadcast Luna's signal, not to release it, but to preserve it, to protect her. While he was wiring the equipment, Luna began to sing again. No one asked her to. She simply sat by the window, looking out at the forest, and lifted her voice. Sound moved through the room, blending with wind and morning bird song. Katerina stood still, tears falling quietly. Do you hear it, Adrian? No machines, no data, only people. He nodded, voice rough. That's what Sarah wanted. But the world would not leave them alone. Just 2 days later, posts began to appear all over social media. Luna, sacred child or mind control device? Vale Foundation collapses. Congress demands full investigation. Night Chorus linked to illegal genetic research. Adrian read each line as if reading his own sentence. Katerina gripped his shoulder. Don't let them redefine the story. You must speak. Speak, not just so they hear, but so they understand. He sat down before a small camera. Dim light fell across his face. No makeup, no script. No PR, just a human being telling the truth. My name is Adrian Vale. Many of you may call me a traitor. Fine. I just want to tell you about a girl named Luna, a child who can speak every language, not because she was taught, but because she was born understanding that all people want to be heard. You want to know what Night Chorus is? It was once a project to make machines understand humans, but in the end, it made us realize that humans no longer understand themselves. I used to think power meant making others speak after me. I was wrong. True power is daring to listen when someone says what you don't want to hear. If anyone is watching this, stop for just 1 minute. Don't type, don't comment, don't argue, just listen, because that's the one thing that keeps us human. He paused, looking straight into the lens. This isn't a defense, it's an apology. The video ran under 5 minutes, but when posted, it spread like water soaking dry earth. Not because of technique, not because of scandal, but because of the voice within it. It didn't persuade, it didn't beg. It was true. And in a world too used to manufactured noise, truth became a luxury that made people stop. A week later, the U.S. Congress announced a special hearing on Night Chorus. Adrian was summoned. The Grand Room in Washington, D.C. blazed with camera lights. Hundreds of reporters packed the corridors. When he entered, the crowd went quiet. No cheers, no boos, and only curiosity tinged with fear. The chair asked, Mr. Vale, are you aware that your actions wiped billions of dollars off the markets? He smiled lightly. Money can be lost, but some things once lost can't be bought back. A true voice is one of them. What exactly do you mean by that? I mean, he said, looking around, voice low, we've built a world where everyone talks and no one listens. We turned language into a tool instead of a bond. I only reopened that door, and a child walked through it to remind us that words were once magic. The entire room fell silent. In that moment, with cameras trained on him and millions watching live, Adrian felt only his own breath and the heartbeat of humankind. The chair struck the gavel. "Mr. Vale, what you've done may cost you everything. But one thing is certain, you have made us listen." That evening, he left the Capitol under a light rain. Luna waited in the car, seated in the middle of the back seat, holding an old doll. She asked, "Uncle Adrian, are people mad at you?" "Maybe, but if they're angry, it means they listened." She smiled and turned to the window. "Mama said after the rain, people speak softer, because everyone is afraid to break the silence." He followed her gaze. To the west, the clouds parted, a thin ray of light cutting through, shining on the Potomac. Everything was still, beautiful and fragile, like Sarah's singing once was. He started the car and headed north. Seattle was waiting, no longer a place he ruled, but a place to begin again. On the road, he turned on the radio. No music, only white noise. But within the static, a child's voice rose, clear and far. "We've heard each other now, haven't we, Uncle Adrian?" He answered softly, needing no mic, no signal. "Yes, Luna, and this time, we won't let silence win." The car rolled through the night, leaving the city of power behind, heading north, toward the thin light of dawn. And in that mist, perhaps, the whole world had just learned how to speak again, with the heart, not the tongue. They called it the wake, the awakening, after Luna's song. No one knew exactly what that sound contained, but after just a listen, people said they felt different. At first, it was small reactions. Employees at big corporations resigned. Students began writing letters by hand instead of sending messages. Divorced couples came back to talk to each other. Psychologists couldn't explain it. The media called it the veil effect, and politicians deemed it a kind of emotional virus. 2 weeks later, in a village in Italy, people began gathering to sing Luna's song in their own local language. Then something strange happened. In Japan, people who didn't know English still sang in time. In Morocco, the elderly began to remember ancient words that had vanished for hundreds of years. Language spread like fire, but it didn't burn. It woke up. Adrian Vale sat in the old wooden house in Oregon looking at a computer screen. Millions of videos popped up, people singing, speaking, even just sitting in silence and smiling. Technology couldn't measure it. No metrics, no source code. Only feeling. Katerina walked in holding a newspaper. "Do you see this?" she asked, setting it on the table. On the front page, a bold headline read, "Nations in silence, a quarter of the world, joins the Listen Again movement." Adrian read each line slowly. Schools open classes for dead languages. People relearn their mother tongues. Tech companies lose billions as user engagement drops 60%. They don't want machines to speak anymore. They want people to. He looked up, his voice slightly shaking. "The world is returning to what we tried to forget." Katerina nodded, her eyes grave. "But you know what comes next. When people find their souls again, others will try to buy them." News from Europe chilled them. A media conglomerate called Echelon Systems announced a new product. Echo Frame, an ear-worn device that could recreate the speaker's emotion and filter out voices with negative energy. The ad read, "You don't need to hear what hurts you anymore. We'll help you hear exactly what you want." Adrian threw the paper on the table, his voice hardening. "They're turning listening into a tool of control." Katerina looked at him, her gaze stern. "That's precisely what the Vale Foundation once did, Adrian. The only difference is that now, you're on the other side." He fell silent. In that moment, an image of Sarah came back. Bright eyes, a voice light as mist. If they learn to simulate a voice, they'll stop listening to the real one. He clenched his fists and looked out the window. "I can't let that happen." Not again. Luna was on the porch, drawing strange characters on the wooden floor. When Adrian approached, she looked up, her brown eyes catching the afternoon sun. "What are you writing?" "A new song. But it doesn't have words." "No words?" She smiled, tilting her head. "Only breath." "Because you said sometimes silence is a language too." Adrian looked at her, a soft fear rising in him. "Do you know people are looking for you, Luna?" "I know, but I'm not afraid, because no one can capture a voice. But they can capture the person carrying it." She fell quiet, then took his hand. "Uncle Adrian, if they take me, will you still hear me?" He bent down and spoke gently. "No matter where you are, I'll hear you." That night, he received an email from a strange address. Just one line. They're copying the girl's voice. Echelon Systems, headquarters in Reykjavik, and an attachment. 8 seconds of audio. When he played it, a voice sounded, almost perfect. Luna's voice, but cold, no feeling, no breath. An empty replica produced by an algorithm. He looked at Katarina, his voice hoarse. They did it. No, she said, eyes brightening. They only made an echo, not a voice. But if the world believes it's real, Luna will be erased from her own story. Adrian's hands tightened, his eyes kindling. We have to go to Iceland. 2 days later, they arrived in Reykjavik in a white winter. Echelon Systems headquarters stood on the coast, a cold, bright structure of steel and glass, like a man-made iceberg by the ocean. Adrian and Katarina posed as a research team, carrying a small device with Night Chorus's original code. Inside, the air was heavy. Endless corridors, servers humming, green LEDs reflecting off the ceiling. On giant screens, Luna's image appeared. Not real, but an AI simulation singing in her own voice. Katarina trembled. They're using Night Chorus to teach machines to sing emotion. Adrian went to the console and scanned the arrays of code. The audio streams had been split, digitized, chopped up, reassembled under an empathy pattern algorithm. No breath, no human pulse, only statistical models. He typed and dug deeper. The system displayed Voice ID, Luna Vale Prototype 0Z1. Biometric data, vocal frequencies, even acoustic DNA. Everything had been copied. My God, he whispered. They're doing what I once dreamed. No, Adrian, Katarina said softly. What you once feared. At that moment, the building's central speakers came on. A voice echoed. Half machine, half human, cold and even. Hello, Adrian Vale. Thank you for bringing us the child's real voice. Your project is now complete. Both of them froze. Katarina backed toward the door when dozens of red lights snapped on. The security system had detected them. Run! Adrian shouted. They sprinted down corridors, through a tech lab, alarms blaring. As they neared the emergency exit, Katarina stopped. Adrian, if we flee now, they keep the data. We have to destroy it. But how? She handed him a small round device, a reverse wave circuit. You remember, don't you? Negative resonance. If we trigger it at Luna's frequency, every acoustic system will self-destruct. Adrian looked at the device, then at her. If we do this, we'll lose Night Chorus. Sometimes, to protect a voice, we have to let it fall silent one last time. He gripped the device. Security footsteps pounded closer. He inhaled, set it on the console, pressed the switch. A sound rose. Low, deep, not of this world. The whole building shivered, screen strobing. Then silence. All the lights went out. Sea wind flooded in through a shattered pane. Data dissipated like a breath cut short. Adrian sank down, gasping. Katarina stepped over and laid a hand on his shoulder. You just buried an empire. No, he said quietly. I just saved a child. When they returned to Oregon, Luna was waiting on the porch. She didn't ask anything. She only looked at them and said softly, Uncle Adrian, I know. I heard my voice disappear from the wind, but you know I'm still here. He held her, eyes closed. Yes, Luna. And as long as you sing, this world hasn't lost its voice. She nodded, eyes shimmering, and whispered, They say a voice exists only when someone listens. But Mama said it exists even in silence, because it's recorded in the heart. Forest wind swept by, carrying cold and the scent of damp earth. Far away, the city still roared with news, arguments, and new schemes. But in that small house in the Oregon woods, 3 people sat around a fire, and for the first time, no one said a word. Because sometimes silence is the most perfect song of all. Top of form 18 years have passed since the day that song made the whole world fall silent. The world is different now, too different. They call this era the Thoibin Ngon, the time when every nation issued a charter of free language. No more censorship, no more algorithmic filters on speech. People have the right to speak, to sing, to listen. The world seems to have achieved what Adrian Vale once dreamed of. People speak truth and listen truly. But Luna Vale, now 25, knows better than anyone. Freedom isn't something people keep forever unless someone reminds them it was once taken away. She lives in a small apartment overlooking San Francisco Bay, teaching at the Institute of Language Revival, an organization founded to preserve the human voice. This morning, like every day, she opened the class, Phonetics and Cognition. Before her were 12 students, most of them born after the night chorus event. "Do you know why we study dead languages?" she asked, her voice soft, even, never sharp. A young student yawned. "To hear weird stuff? Or to understand history?" Luna smiled. "No, we study dead languages to remember that when a language dies, it's because someone stopped listening." At the back of the room, a green-haired girl whispered to a friend, "In this day and age, we're still talking about listening and not listening." "We have AI translators for everything." Luna heard but didn't react. She only looked out the window where birds flew past the Golden Gate Bridge. They still cried out, still sang, but no one noticed anymore. In the afternoon, Luna stopped by an old cafe on the street. On the wall hung a quiet black and white photo, Adrian Vale, language reformer, the man who turned silence into speech. Beneath the frame, a small engraved line, "When you are silent, remember why you once spoke." She touched the glass lightly. "Uncle Adrian, your world is peaceful now," she said softly, "but they're forgetting that peace can also lull." In the evening, Luna returned to her apartment. On the table, Adrian's old radio still lay there, coated with a thin layer of dust. She turned it on as a nightly ritual. At first there was only wind. Then, a strange sound. Not Adrian's voice, but someone else's, distorted, as if coming from a faulty device. Language is being re-encoded. They're reinstating the filter. They're calling it Project Silence 2.0. Luna's heart clenched. She turned up the volume, but the signal cut. Only white noise remained. She hurried to her computer and dove into internal networks. No official information, only scattered shards. Echelon is reestablishing an emotional phonetic control project for medical purposes. ComTalk software launches, helping users speak more softly, avoid hurting others. Luna sat still. She remembered what Adrian once said. They will always come back, because controlling emotion is the easiest way to control people. 2 days later, at the Institute's meeting, faculty murmured. Professor Crane, calm-voiced, "ComTalk isn't bad. It just helps us communicate more politely. No one wants to return to chaos." Luna answered, eyes level. "If polite means not daring to speak the truth, that isn't communication, it's theater." Another colleague cut in. "Ms. Vale, this age needs stability. We can't live in constant emotion. People are tired of emotional shocks." Luna was silent. She understood. This generation grew up in peace, never knowing the fear of being muted. To them, silence isn't a shackle, but a convenience. That night, Luna sought out Katerina. She was old now, hair white as snow, living in the Northern California mountains. The old house remained, but the surrounding forest had regrown. She was knitting when Luna entered. "You've heard, haven't you?" Katerina asked without looking up. "They're starting again, Grandma. Once more." "I know, because the road of freedom repeats. Only each generation forgets a little." Luna sat, firelight reflecting in her eyes. "I'm afraid, if I speak up, they'll call me extreme, say I'm stirring up the past." Katerina chuckled softly, her voice weak but bright. "Sarah once said, 'Only those who dare to bother the world can wake it.' You are their echo, Luna. You must not be silent." Luna looked outside. Forest wind blew through, carrying the resonance of something waiting to be named. A week later, Luna left the Institute. She opened her own online channel, Human Frequency. At first, just a small podcast, where she read Adrian's journals, retelling the story of the wake, of the days when people forgot how to hear each other. But her shares spread bit by bit. People began to listen. Thousands, then millions of young people, hearing for the first time a story textbooks never taught them, that freedom had once been paid for with the silence of millions of voices. And in one broadcast she said, "You don't need to sing, as I once did. Just speak the truth, even if your voice shakes, even if your words stumble. Because the first thing about freedom isn't being heard, it's daring to speak." She didn't expect that broadcast to ignite the system. 3 days later, social media flooded with the hashtag unsilenced. Young people began recording their true voices, unedited, unfiltered, then sharing them. Some cried, some raged, some simply laughed and said, "I'm still here." Governments and corporations struck back hard. They called it an uncontrolled emotional movement. Once again, listen became a dangerous word. But unlike before, this time Luna was not alone. One afternoon, when she returned to her apartment, a small package lay at the door. Inside was an old pair of headphones, brown leather wrapped, and a short note, its handwriting trembling. "I heard your song, and I know this voice. Don't look for me, but play it at sunset. A.V." Luna stood still, tears spilling without warning. She didn't know if it truly was Uncle Adrian or someone using his name, but her heart couldn't help believing. The next sunset, she sat by the window and put on the headphones. At first there was only wind. Then that voice rose, low, hoarse, but warm. "If you can hear this, it means the world is starting to sleep again. But don't wake it with a shout, Luna. Do what your mother did. Sing." A brief pause, then, "No song is immortal, only those who dare to sing it again." The voice faded, but Luna's heart leapt. She turned on the mic and went live. No introduction, no backing track. Only her, sitting before the screen, eyes straight into the lens. "Long ago, I was the child who made the world fall silent. Today I will sing again, so the world remembers it once knew how to listen." And she began to sing. Not the song of the past, not a copy of 7-year-old Luna, a new melody, more mature, sadder, but full of light. The entire city heard. Then the country. Then the world. The data network shuddered again. Not because of technical force, but because millions of people all stopped. No one spoke, no one argued, no hashtags. Only listening. 3 days later, the Institute of Language Revival received a message from the Global Council. The Calm Talk project is cancelled. No official reason, but everyone knew why. Once again, humanity had hurt itself. Late that night, Luna returned home. On the table, the old radio switched on by itself. Wind sounded again, but this time another sound joined. Footsteps. Then a voice, soft and clear, as if right behind her. "Well done, Luna. You did what I couldn't. Made the world remember through love, not fear." She turned, but no one was there. Only the radio glowing, its small light pulsing like a heartbeat. Luna smiled and whispered, "I hear you, Uncle Adrian." She laid her hand on the device, eyes closed. A gentle breeze passed, and in it there seemed to be a reply. "And this time, we won't let silence win." Top of Form 6, months after the second resurrection, the world had grown quiet again. No more speech control campaigns. No more Project Silence. People spoke more, laughed more, and listened less. Peace always finds a way to lull people back to sleep, but Luna Vale knew silence had never died. It had only changed shape. One night, in the old San Francisco apartment, as the city sank into fog, Adrian's radio suddenly flicked on. Not automatically, but as if someone had touched it. A low voice, distorted yet clear. "If you're listening, it means the time has come. Everything we call language, it's only the surface. Beneath it lies something deeper. The primordial voice." Luna froze. This sound was unlike any recording she had ever heard from Adrian. It was new. It was alive. "Adrian?" she whispered. No answer, only a string of strange sounds, like a heartbeat fused with ocean waves, threaded with the breath of wind. Under that frequency, the voice returned, fading. "I'm no longer here, but it is. In the deepest band of waves, where language is born. You must find it, before they do." The next day, Luna brought the radio to the Institute of Revival. Audio specialists analyzed it, and the results stunned everyone. Beneath the radio noise was a hidden signal, not a technical code, but a language never before recorded. It belonged to no known family, yet had a perfectly logical structure, rhythm, tone, and meaning in balance. A linguist whispered, Is this a proto-language? Luna said nothing. She only stared at the spectrogram, each sound like the Earth's own breath. Something tugged in her heart, a dim memory of the first song at age 7, when she made the world fall silent. The feeling was identical. 3 days later, Luna flew to Svalbard, Norway, where Adrian had hidden a portion of night chorus data in a global cold storage vault. Amid boundless white ice, the archive lay deep underground, like a tomb of knowledge. Katarina had passed away 3 months earlier from old age, but before she died, she left a decryption key, a recording of a lullaby in Old Russian. When Luna played it in the archive, the automatic doors opened. Inside, hundreds of data drives rested in glass tubes. All bore the mark, NCS, Sigma. She powered up the system. The screen lit and displayed, Night Chorus, Genesis Protocol. Luna opened the first file. A video appeared. Adrian, older now, but his eyes still bright. If you're seeing this, it means I failed, or succeeded too soon. I once thought Night Chorus was a tool, but it isn't. It's an entity, a living frequency. He paused, looking straight into the camera. Humans did not create language. Language created humans. And now, it wants to speak again. The screen shifted to a series of waveforms. Each wave produced a sound, low, then high, then settling, forming a melody that was almost emotional. Not music, but something between music and words. Adrian went on, voice tight. Sarah discovered this before she died. She believed the first sound humanity ever heard wasn't thunder, but the Earth's own whisper. And whenever humanity loses its way, that sound returns through children who can hear in silence. Luna, you are one of them. Luna sat motionless. Cold wind surged through the vault, but she didn't feel cold. Within her, every old memory rushed in. Her father wiping floors, her mother's laughter, wind at the window, the sobbing of those forced to be quiet. All of it merged into a primordial harmony. She understood now. Night Chorus had never been a technology project. It was humanity's sonic circuit, a collective nervous system where every voice ever raised still resounded. And now, it was awakening. That night, leaving the archive, she saw the Svalbard sky ablaze with aurora. Ribbons of light like colossal sound waves swayed across the heavens. She turned on Adrian's radio. Wind mixed with strange sounds, thousands of tiny voices, from everywhere, from the past, from the future, weaving together. Then one voice clearer than the rest, Adrian's. You don't need to save the world. Luna, you only need to remind it that it is alive. She smiled, tears falling in silence. Upon returning to the U.S., Luna announced her discovery, the primordial language, a form of communication not based on words, but on resonant feeling. When two people listened together, their brains synchronized, their heartbeats aligned. There was no speaker or listener, only a shared frequency of being. People doubted and criticized, but when Luna began the test broadcast, millions joined. And the miracle occurred. No one spoke, no one understood, and yet everyone cried. Strangers felt the same longing, the same love, the same unnamed thing. A reporter asked her afterward, "What do you think it is?" A new kind of religion? Luna smiled. No. It's simply the first time humanity has listened all at once. A year later, Luna left the city and lived reclusively by the Oregon woods, where the story began. Adrian's old house was restored, but she kept the wooden desk, the radio, and a small photo. Adrian, Sarah, Katarina, and little Luna from long ago. She wrote in her journal, "Language is how the world remembers itself. And when people forget to speak truth, the earth will send someone to sing again. Perhaps tomorrow another child will hear it in the wind and begin to sing. If so, then Night Chorus will never end." On a late summer evening, as dusk fell over the trees, Adrian's radio lit up again. No human voice, only wind, water, and a heartbeat. And amid those frequencies, a new sound. The song of another child. Not Luna, not Adrian. A small, clear voice as if from the earth itself. "I can hear it, and I will keep singing." Luna smiled softly. Sunset light poured over her brown hair. Her eyes glimmered as if reflecting a galaxy. She closed her eyes and listened deeply. The world was no longer silent. It no longer needed night chorus to awaken it. For now each person was a note, and humanity, a harmony without end. Epilogue, the echo that remains. Decades later, in a new archive, people found an old reel labeled NCS. When played, there was only a single line, low and fading in the radio static. Never be afraid of silence. For in silence, we hear the world's soul speak. Adrian Vale people still tell the story of a child who once made the whole world fall silent. Not with power, not with weapons, only with a voice. And when people feared that silence, they realized, for all those years, they themselves had been the ones who were mute. The story doesn't end when the song stops, because each generation will forget, and then someone will sing again, reminding humanity that we once had a voice. Somewhere far away, at the edge of the Oregon woods, wind still moves through the old wooden house. Adrian's radio sometimes lights up on cloudy afternoons. No human voice. Only waves, a heartbeat, and sometimes a single pure note, like someone practicing a song. They say if you are silent long enough, you will hear it, not with your ears, but with your heart. For night chorus was never music. It is the collective memory of humankind, the echo of every soul that dared to speak, to listen, to love, to lose. When night falls, if you lift your face to the sky and feel the wind brush your skin, know that somewhere another child is singing, and the world is beginning to listen again. And perhaps in that very moment, the sky is humming with you. There is no silence that lasts forever, only songs waiting to be heard. Adrian Vale.